Okay, chale. Welcome, Mr. Taha Iqbal, to our little podcast. For anybody who doesn't know at this point, Taha Iqbal is one of, I think, the three best Pakistani speakers ever, having been one of only three people ever to make it to a finals at World Universities Debating Championship and a finalist and top 10 speaker at the European Universities Debating Championship, which puts him ahead of pretty much everybody whose name isn't either Ansar Aftabi, Hamza Tariq Chaudhary, the only other people he's inhabiting the GOAT conversation with at this point in time. Though, on top of this, Taha Iqbal is also one of my very best friends and somebody who I have a very, very, very long debate acquaintance with. So I'm very intrigued to find out at which point he became better than me, and according to him, what changed and allowed all of these terrific, terrific things to happen. So, sabse pehle, Mr. Iqbal, thank you very much for being here. I believe you have some choice words you want to say about my scheduling for anybody who happens to hear.
Thanks for being here on time, Mr. Masuda. Thanks for keeping track of GMT and BST instead of just doing a simple Google search. But yeah, I love the introduction where you go one of the top three, and then you specifically place me as third. Just say third. There's no need to say top three.
पता
But
नहीं.
thanks.
I think you are competitive वहाँ पे, but yeah, it's basically these three people, and then it's everybody who has never made it anywhere. I think past maybe I think octo finals or something at World Universities. I'm actually not sure what the everybody else has accomplished who's gone from Pakistan. Oh, it is also worth noting that you and Hamza are the first ever all Pakistani team to have made it anywhere notable inside worlds. I think with the only previous Pakistani speakers having done well being Ansar and I think Asadullah Khan, who made it to like the open octo finals or quarterfinals. I'm not sure, but in either case, those were done on teams with non-Pakistanis. So very, very big deal for us. But chale, I think what we're going to do, I just have a few questions, Saath pe, so we'll let those navigate the conversation. But apart from that, any interesting topic which comes up can get right into. I think best to start at the beginning for anybody who doesn't know. Taha Iqbal, what are the extremely unlikely origins of your debate career?
Well, the likely origins of my debate career. That's a fun one. यार पहले तो I guess the right way to say this is I was actually never interested in debate at all. My school thrust me into a lot of things, and my mom was more than happy to just use school's thrusting and just push me into every place she could. I think that comes from the fact that my mom and my khalas think of themselves as people who are fairly good at academics, but also people who could do some stuff with speeches and all. So I used to declaim. I distinctly remember my earliest memory of speaking publicly was at this WWF thing that used to happen, where you would get 30 minutes to write a speech and then deliver a speech, and my mom wrote every single word. And I just went up there and said it. I don't even remember what I said. I seemed to do pretty well, but I would credit that win solely to my mom for writing my speech. Otherwise, it would have been really embarrassing.
Are you not
In
going to be sweet and credit all of your subsequent wins to your mom? तुम नहीं करोगे. You won't say it's
यार नहीं,
all on
उसके
her.
बाद वो जिस भी टूर्नामेंट में आती रही मैं हारता रहा, तो मैंने उनको कह दिया आप ना आया करें. इनफैक्ट आई वाज जस्ट लाइक आप बस गाड़ी में भी ना लेने आया करें, वो मैं हारता रहता हूँ जब भी आप आती हैं. सो इट वाज यूजुअली द ड्राइवर और अब्बू. um no, so obviously like my mom was like a major push factor. She was like, you need to do stuff that is other than studying, which was obviously good. My school had, I think, a dearth of choices in my year as well, which is just that there were kids who were not that interested, parents who were potentially also not that interested in investing into this. So my school just found me and it was like, okay, yeah, go. In terms of actual parliamentary debating, which is, I guess, what you want to hear about more, I had no experience of parliamentary debating. I'd never watched a parliamentary debate. I had never been to a parliamentary debate camp. So my school teachers essentially thought it'd be a good idea for me to accompany the two teams that we had to the UCP tournament. They went there. Our head boy and somebody speaking on I think he was speaking on Team B or something at that time. He found out whilst we were at the tournament that his mom had dengue. At that point, dengue was like a huge thing, so he had to leave, and it was a competition between me and this other friend of mine, whose only reason for being there was that he had been educated in South Africa and Germany. Um, it was between me and him to speak, and basically बस यार वो बहुत फट्टू था. Or he was like, नहीं मैंने नहीं करना, and I was like, okay, there's no choice, then I'll go. And I remember my first debate then was at UCB, speaking third, not knowing how to speak. That was actually my first experience of debate as well. I'd never even seen what was going to happen, and it was against FC. And I spoke for a grand total of 2 minutes and 10 or 12 seconds before I went down. It was a pretty embarrassing experience, but also humbling, I'd say. बट पहले तो मेरी फट गई. मैंने कहा यार यूनिवर्सिटी वालों को तो हमारे साथ नहीं compete करना चाहिए यार, ये तो हम बच्चे हैं. I thought
And
that whatever
because I
was
think most people don't know, just how young were you then? This
I
isn't like
was
some A1 student having his first foray into parliamentary
it was
debating.
class 8, so I was
Yeah.
12. I'd say 12. Yeah,
Yeah.
12. 12 or 13, something like that. So I was, yeah. और उसके बाद जैसे मैं उतरा तो बस मेरी टीम वाले बस मेरे लेना शुरू कर गए, like what have you done, and I was like, you can't expect me to do this. I said exactly what you told me, and they had to be fair to me, like they told me some points, but all of those were not really good points if you look back at those in hindsight. But yeah, that was my first tournament, and interestingly enough, that was the first tournament where I met with the likes of, well, Salman Shahid. Because I also got my first win in my first tournament, despite not being able to make time. But very respectably, I made it to the 6 minute mark, which for me was a big deal at that point. We beat, I don't know who Salman was coaching at that point. We beat their team. It was, I think, Saikas or Salamat Girls or something. And then he had to sit us down, and basically he asked us, ये judge ठीक था तुम लोगों के साथ? Did he do anything funny? And I didn't really understand what that meant at that point. But it seemed like he was just, I don't know, yeah, trying to get some goss on the judge, and I don't know, stir the pot a bit. But yeah, that was my first tournament, UCP.
Okay, that sounds. See, now from the surface of it, that doesn't sound like the most enjoyable first encounter with debating. So, how
Yeah,
did
it was daunting. It was just
one
like, why?
random, yeah. So, how did this one random miserable encounter not make you decide, okay, this isn't for me. Everybody else is speaking 8 minutes. I can only do 2 minutes. This isn't an activity I want to commit myself to.
Yeah, I don't think you realize it. This was not a very my participation in this activity was not based on my consent. I have told you, but like my principal and my chemistry teacher, so Vasif at that point, and then Miss Seda, they were super involved and super eager to send me to everything. So at that point, I wasn't even just doing debate. It was debate, declamation, playing Sudoku, playing chess, going to sports fests. I had multiple things going on at every single weekend, and I just thought that was normal because that was also something that was celebrated almost in the school. So every popular kid used to be a debater. So any head boy that we had, every single one, it was a shocker when we had a head boy who had not debated. And the precise reason for that was, I think Sir Vasif was like historically involved with the DSP or the PDS. He used to debate. He used to have those psychast teams, which at some point won nationals. So everyone wanted to be like that, and debate was the first real thing that we were good at because we inherited some speakers from SciCast when the split with SciCast happened. Saad, I remember Saad Suhail. He won WIDPSC and he became sort of the big celebrity in the school. So it was just one. It just seemed cool, which is a very weird way of framing debate because I don't think people normally associate debate with coolness, but in our school it was cool. And then the second reason being, I really, really hated declaiming. I did not like the fact that I had to, one, remember a speech by heart, and usually the time period was like a day. I'd have max a day or two to learn it. And then secondly, I was criticized very harshly if I fumbled or anything like that. So I really hated that feeling of doing declamations. I also felt that there was nothing. I mean, apart from like some rhetorical skill, there was nothing that the thing was teaching me, and all I used to hear was either slightly perverted humor in the funny speeches, although there were some speeches that were genuinely funny, or English speeches that were largely just like as high as possible. I will say though, I have massive respect for declaimers, especially like the top tier ones. I remember from the Urdu circuit, if you know Raza Gilani or Zahid back in the day, they used to be very, very good. And I still genuinely think that if you pick the best crop of Pakistani English BP debaters and you pick those Urdu speakers, um, they are perhaps a lot, not perhaps, they are 100% a lot more persuasive than we will ever be. And that was a level which I was also, I was acutely aware that I was never going to reach that level of almost perfection. So I just wanted to be away from that activity as much as possible. And parliamentary debate allowed for, I get a bit of fun. No adult supervision, some crazy things happening in prep, some crazy arguments being run, and also time away from the parents. You could stay out late, all those kinds of things. So I was just like, yeah, cool. I was moderately consenting to this, but part of the push was still from the school and my parents.
That's fair. And I guess you could say that explains why you were doing this activity throughout your school years. Although, even there, I do want to note, I think you definitely went to a lot more tournaments and more types of tournaments than your average school speaker who gets like strong armed in debating. Because, especially in schools which are part of the DSP, you have a tendency for those schools to attend the DSP tournaments. But if your first tournament ever is UCP, that implies to me that you are going beyond the regular Call of Duty as a school speaker.
Yeah, so when I went to UCB, there was no school there. I think there was maybe one or two, but no school presence there. That was partly because again, Sir Wasif and Mr. didn't really get along with the DSP. And I don't know what the details are anymore, but we just didn't get along. I still haven't. I mean, not still. Like I'm not 17 anymore, but I never participated in any under 17 competition, for example, which would be the natural pathway or route for lots of speakers to develop. And my first ever under 19 tournament was actually just nationals. And that was because our A team, all of them pulled out and they were like, we need to study. So there was a hodgepodge team that was made up, and then I was just sent without any seniors to nationals.
Yeah, Chilla, that's fair. Though you did, yeah, I suppose, then end up participating in the DSP here and there, even from your school. I guess we don't want to linger too long in the school portion of this because all of the very interesting stuff happens after. But as a quick summary, how do you think your school career was? Do you think you grew a lot? Where do you think you stood relative to the field by the end? I believe you made Park Camp your first year, second year speaking, right?
Yeah, I made park camp on in my first attempt. I think I ranked 12th. Um, but the problem was because I just didn't know anything about the world of debate, and nationals was literally like one of the first three tournaments I spoke. I didn't know that there was such a thing as the park camp. I did not know that there was a Pakistan team. I did not know that there was something called WSTC. The only way I found out was that our head boy was actually really good friends with Azim Liaquat, because again they went to Salamat together, and that was like fairly. I mean, the split had happened, but like those guys still kept in touch. And our head boy got a call from Azim saying, "Where's your kid? He's not in camp. They have cut him." And that's when and people in my school were just like very shocked because I don't think anyone had ever made camp from Saisa. And I didn't really feel bad about it because I didn't really know what it meant. I was just like, oh, cool, no worries. I didn't go to camp, and then I moved on. But after that, I never went to camp. I think the proudest achievement, I to sum it up, would be we were fairly behind just the circuit in terms of access to resources, speakers. Just generally, I think Srivastava also had so much on his plate with chemistry, with managing the school, with stuff. That debate wasn't really something that I learned in school. It was more something I learned at tournaments. And given that, the fact that we broke at nationals three times in a row was a big deal because I don't think any Sisa team had consistently broken that much. But also, I was acutely aware that I was never going to beat the top teams anyway. So just the fact that we had scraped through three times
It's not.
was big.
It's not completely true that you never beat the top teams. In fact, a mutual friend of ours who did very well at nationals one year, coming straight hot out of Karachi in a miraculous Cedar College run at the time, I believe broke either first or second, and happened to run into lowly little Saisa, breaking, I think, either bottom or next to bottom in the quarterfinal one time. Isn't that right?
Yes, I genuinely don't know how we won that. I would say though that was in my A2, and I had gotten a lot better in my A2, largely because of again the university circuit at that point was the Wild Wild West. But also the good thing about the Wild Wild West is you get to argue Wild Wild West arguments, which school speakers don't make. Um, it was a reparations debate, I still remember, and we were on the anti-reparation side of things. So Zed really should not have lost that round. Anyways, we ended up winning. We were also just like, who are these people from Cedar? And I wanted to speak the F bomb or whatever. Yeah, we kicked out Zed. That was really funny. They looked really sad. And us waqt I remember distinctly, Straight Outta Compton आई थी movie, वो the rap वाली. तो अगले दिन we were meeting up with the Paragon like Badr वगैरह थे, and they were like, oh yeah, you knocked out Cedar, and I was like, bro, we've knocked out two Karachi teams like in a row. So it was Zed was in the Octos, but उससे पहले it was I think Nixer, Ali Ahmed Shah वगैरह बोल रहे थे, or somebody else, I don't remember, but it was Nixer, and it was like straight out of Lahore, because anti-Karachi hatred unites Lahori teams.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
a you'd be surprised by how much that resonates with the circuit. I think this year a lot of Lahori teams had a lot of complaints with Karachi once again. But I think you're actually probably underselling a little bit the quality of speaker you were in schools. I think your results didn't reflect it as often. Like, and I recall every time I bumped into you when you were still in school. So twice in Shajifna, the under 19 category in 2015, I recall. And then I think I judged you at Sondhi's camp, and then I judged
yeah.
you again at nationals later that year. I recall every time not thinking, okay, he's going to be in the World Universities grand finals one day, but that this is a remarkably smart speaker. And I was never very surprised when you started getting very good, which I think probably we can shepherd into what I will broadly describe as phase two of your debating life, which is university in Pakistan, so LUMS. What was coming to LUMS and becoming a speaker in LUMS like for you as a transition away from your SISA days?
It was a big one. So in the school circuit, I was successful. We in at when I was at school, I was successful in university tournaments. So Shajibna's, I had a streak of losing three finals in the schools category and whatnot. And I remember Sondi camp distinctly, because actually people at my school didn't want me to go. They were actually really mad that I was going to that camp, and I also remembered by that point, Sondi camp was the first real time where I felt, oh, this is definitely not for me. Where you could very easily get the vibe of, they don't know who you are, and they don't seem to particularly care. Largely, I actually I knew that I was going to get cut in the first round. Um, but yeah, I felt like at that point it was only me and Amna who were relative outsiders, even though I think Amna was a bit more, she knew more people, or she was still at least managing to do more with that crop. But I do remember that in terms of the judging and all that, I felt like a complete outsider. So I was also, it was only at the point where I think when you judged me, I was just doing reply. They essentially just said, "Yeah, we
Yeah, I
don't even
think
need
so.
to hear 8 minutes of you or whatever. Just do 4 minutes of this." And then I just decided not to do a reply and just rip into people, because I thought that lots of people were really stupid, but they were being credited way too much. So I might as well show them that they're stupid. But yeah, Sondis was a big thing for me, which also informed my start at LUMS essentially, because I felt like, oh, this is going to be like, it's not going to be a smooth transition. I'm not going to be the main guy like I was at SAISA, understandably so, because you were there, Hafiz was there. I mean, at that point, Nawal was there. They had come off like UADC. Hafiz was getting really popular in the school circuit. So LUMS was sort of intimidating for me for the first two camps, because I remember Hafiz did that the thing with the freshers, if you remember the freshers against freshers thing, and I showed up with Ahab. I think
Oh
you spoke
yeah,
that round as well.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Although I was
and
just off by then.
that was a really bad debate. But when I was in that round, I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I think I can hold my own. This isn't a particularly good debate, but like I think I can hold my own. But my development in at least the first year, I'm not sure how much you've discussed on pod, but was largely due to, I think, you, Nawal, and Hafiz. They're super focused in, I don't know, developing me as a speaker. I think I learned a lot in my first year just by being with you guys, where I wasn't the most vocal. I don't think I was the most vocal. It was largely just a product of, well, these guys know a lot more than me. They speak a lot better than me. So maybe I'll just mold it. So all those, I guess, arguments that we used to run in school is stupid, like social contract, like something utilitarianism. And I was like, oh yeah, that's why people keep telling me not to run them, because they actually don't make sense. And this is how argumentation is sort of done. That was my first big thing. I think at LUMS I did feel that there would be a lot more competition than there ended up being, but I think there was a lot more competition. It was just that I think there was also a lot more nepotism. I don't know why I ended up on the right side of the nepotism spectrum, where I don't know, people who are good decided to speak with me as opposed to with others. I feel like, I don't know, if other people also spoke, they might have done similarly well. Like for example, Moaz came with me, right? Moaz was hands down a much better school speaker than I was. Moaz was also much better recognized, but for some reason, I guess I was lucky. Moaz wasn't that interested in speaking through the LUMS people. He was more interested in the Gande Bache and all that fun stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of the little
LUMS was
subgroups.
a transition, but I didn't really feel like I was out because I think the culture was generally weirdly inclusive. Like a lot of people were hanging around a lot, all the time, which was not true for my previous debate teams. Or some of those debate teams it was true for, but like for some it wasn't. So it wasn't that difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah, first year was just that. I think if you want to go into the second and third year, where I think I did have, so I had a remarkably successful first year as well. I don't remember how many trophies.
I I think it
I,
was your most successful year because I've
yeah,
discussed this before, and I think it's the one that you deserve the success the least in. But it's the one
yeah.
that you have like I think you've just won everything that year. Shajivna, Lums IV, like three or four other fairly large trophies.
Yeah, so Sajivna was it. It was me and Hafiz. I felt like I was mostly the mouthpiece during that campaign.
But what a mouthpiece!
Well, more efficient mouthpiece than maybe others would have been, but that was mouthpiece time. LSE was essentially again Nawal, Hafiz, and myself, which was a pretty strong team at that point. I think the two strongest 3-person teams I've been in would be like with that team, and probably I guess the strongest 3-person team was me, you, Hafiz at Head Start, where we got knocked out by
Supernova.
Aku. Um, but yeah, I think for Lums IV, I was definitely carried by Fizan Raja in the final. Shout out to Fizan, who decided to make sense as opposed to copy Will Jones in the final, which I think also shows a lot about my first year debating, which is it was a lot more to do with imitation as opposed to genuinely trying to, I don't know, innovate or whatever. It was more like, oh, मैंने इतनी ज़्यादा debate videos देखनी है, शेंगबुली ये कहता है, विल जोन्स ये कहता है, इन सब की arguments ये हैं, इस तरह debate में मैं apply कर सकता हूँ, तो क्यों नहीं apply कर देते हैं. और फिर हाफिज ने इस तरह की चीज़ें सिखाई हुई हैं, तो हाफिज ने इस तरह की चीज़ें सिखाई हुई हैं, and just go with it. But I think largely that success is also just because Hafiz had such a grip over the circuit at that point. He was just like fucking winning everything that he was in. Um, so that was that. Second year was a bit more different, but that's also because I feel like in the next 3 years at LUMS, and this is true for LUMS in general. I think maybe I don't know about LUMS now, but in universities over here, I feel like speakers grow together as a team, and they not only grow as speakers, they understand each other better because they speak with each other largely for the course of 3 years. They'll speak all the major tournaments together through selection or whatnot. There'll be some changes, but in LUMS there was like way too much change. I mean, and that was also a good thing. I feel like we developed a lot of speakers at that point, and LUMS was the strongest it had ever been. Even though Hafiz won everything, I think in terms of genuine quality and the frequency with which we were churning out speakers, it was better because I do remember before Hafiz, there was this like dip in LUMS where people used to, I think that they were good, but like they weren't really successful in the local circuit at all. They weren't even present at the local circuit. Where we decided after the first UADC campaign to take up things from the international circuit, like do pro AMs, where I remember when we were taking charge of camp, we did all those things. That is one of the reasons why I think we didn't I wasn't that successful because quite often, Masood, if you don't remember, I was coming up against the likes of you. It was more me versus you than me with you, and when it was me with you, it was some LGS 55 main team coming out of nowhere uh, to thrash us. So I think that was generally the reason for why maybe success wise we weren't doing well trophy wise, but I think there was a lot of development going on, and most of that development started after the first UADC when we had those like when we had success for the first time. You touched the quarterfinals, particularly with the trauma of I guess the collective trauma of the period before UADC where we were all consistently told we would not do well. I think doing well there, meeting with people there, and for the first time, and this is the biggest one, for the first time, getting people giving decisions, even if they were giving the wrong reasons, at the very least in a very structured, followable manner, where there were very clear indications of this is what you need to do for this argument to be better, and this is what you need to prove. I think most of the development happened just as a result of the feedback from the likes of like Mifzal, Jenna, There were a bunch of others. I think I remember Alison Young was pretty good as well. There were quite a few decent judges that we ended up hitting, and those judges ended up informing us in a lot more ways. And I guess that's where more one obviously the confidence to do well, and to continue doing well. That's where it came. I guess with that a lot more arrogance as well, which has not diminished, by the way, in case you're
That's good.
wondering.
That's good.
Um, and um, and yeah, just the fact that for the first time I realized, oh, all these people who've been telling me all my life that this is not the way to debate are actually incorrect. So my, I guess my internal judgment that all of these people are idiots was correct. So yeah, I think that's the first time where we were like, okay, fine. If the Pakistani debate circuit doesn't want to change, we'll, I don't know, we'll change ourselves, and hopefully that'll work. And I think to
And
be fair, it did.
I absolutely think it did. I don't think you've been at a Pakistani tournament in several years now, but I've been re-engaging myself in the activity for the past couple of years. And let me tell you, 10 years ago, words like impact, comparatives, mechanisms, and stuff did not exist on the Pakistani scene. I'm sure you recall. Now every other school kid is talking to you about how they have four mechanisms for their impact, and sometimes it's annoying and they're lying and they're not right about something being a mechanism or an impact, but all the same, like it's dramatic the transformation that's taken place in terms of people actually talk about debates like there's a process and you have to compare things actively rather than just sort of vibe it out in the days of the good old debating West in Pakistan. I did want to touch on something you said though, because I think you just let that one slip under the radar. Yes, we all went to our first Asian debating championships, UADC, and over there at your very first one, you made it to the quarterfinal, and that was a big deal because the previous year LUMS had made it to the octofinal. Before that, I'm not aware of any Pakistani team that had. I
No,
think one had
Zen
broken
Zen
once.
Saab were,
Yeah,
yeah, they
Zen
were pretty
broke
good.
once, and that was the only other octofinal we've had. And the quarterfinal you made it to your first time was a Pakistani record that remained unmatched and unbroken until I think the online era, so like 20 or 21, I forget, when LUMS again made it to the quarterfinal and then eventually, finally beating it, made it to the semifinal. So even at the time, I think that must have been a ridiculous achievement because not only did you do that, but you did it without, at the time, I think the only two speakers who were definitively acknowledged probably stronger than you, which were myself and Hafiz, neither of whom were on the team you made it to octofinals with. So, sorry, to quarterfinals with. So, was that a big shift in your self image? Because up till that point, at least, and even after them, I always felt that you had a sort of overly deferential relationship with the speakers who were better than you. And you didn't really, I don't know, see yourself as beating them very often. I recall every time we debated, you tell me I'd win, even when it didn't seem to be the case to me that I'd won. Do you think that that quarterfinal changed things for you in terms of your, I don't know, induction into big debaters?
Oh, that's a big one. So I'll unpack it one by one. So I think the first thing to know is, I was deferential to you and Hafiz for a couple of reasons. One, I genuinely thought that you guys were better than me, which was also just true, right? Like, it was just true that you guys were both better than me. You were already a celebrity by then. Everyone had watched Jami's YouTube upload of yourself, especially because it was institutionalized by the DSP for all kinds of judge tests. So yeah, I knew that you guys were better than me. So I think the differences came from there, which is you guys are better. I might as well learn. I think the other reason for the deference was also the fact that I think if you were ever from a small school, like Saisa, or maybe you also know this because Westminster wasn't like a, well, I know it became a big thing with the back to
Yeah, but
back
not at the
nationals and
time.
whatnot, but at that point it was just like ये randoms आ गए हैं कहीं से भी. I think if you are consistently just a rando who in schools tournaments, I've had this conversation with Wani as well, which is like where no one wants to speak with you largely because like who's Isa, like whatever. um and then judges also don't really respect you. You already go into matches thinking shit ये तो इस ये coach इस बंदे का दोस्त है तो हम तो गए. That was also a lot of our mentality. So we genuinely thought that like I genuinely thought that I wasn't that good. Not gonna lie. The only place in which I felt good about myself and my speaking was in the university circuit, where even though people were clearly doing the wrong kind of debating, they were still a lot more acceptable, but also a lot more amenable to learning. And this is where I think the likes of like people like Fazan and Abrar and all those people, like they didn't start out as like great speakers or whatnot. But I do think that they had a lot more in terms of we actually need to learn and evolve. And the deference bit started before your year. where when I was in my A2, these guys would just ask me like, "Ajo, khana khane aa jao, ya dinner karne aa jao." So I was meeting these guys a lot more at tournaments in general, and that's where the difference bit came in, which is even if I'm learning the wrong things from these people, there's still some stuff that they can teach me. And I found that that was a lot more beneficial to my debating than just being like, okay, a recluse, sit on the side, go to DSP tournament, go back. So that was one. I think the second bit was the arrogance came from more the combative nature of the camp, which is if you are being consistently told at camp, even though a lot of effort was being put in, that you're bad, you're horrible, you're gonna, I don't know, destroy Lums's name or whatever was happening around that time, for you to not only go into the octos, which the previous team did, but also to surpass that with the quarters. It was essentially like a big whatever to whoever was doing that, right? That's where the arrogance came, which is like you have nothing over me. I have gone beyond what your life's biggest achievement is, and that's my first time trying. So I think most of that was rooted in anger as opposed to or revenge, as opposed to me actually believing I was better than you, because even though you had made the octos, I was still convinced that you were much better than me. Um and I think the second thing was also, which was like, I think the speakers I was speaking with, Asfan and Abbas, like Asfan by no measure was considered a top dog in Pakistani debating. I know that he did fairly well at nationals once, but he was quite the forgotten sort of like somebody
Old guard.
there. And then Abbas was the more ridiculed sort of speaker out there for more reasons than his debating career than not. But just to do that with those guys, but then to also have Asad also just like teaching us along the way, because I think one of the key parts of my development that I've probably missed out on is the fact that
Yeah,
Asad
I think
actually
worth
came
doing a
to
quick sidebar to introduce the mysterious figure of Muhammad Asadullah Khan, once a big name on campus in Cambridge University. I
yes.
forget a lot of Asad's big biography, but basically he was a debater at Johor Town, LGS Johor Town here. I think he was moderately successful in the school circuit. Correct me if I'm wrong. Then
Asad
he
wasn't
went.
that successful. I think Asad
He was like
was
moderate, like a
Asad
mid-tier
would be more
school
than happy to
speaker.
admit that Akib was much more successful than he was when they were,
Yeah.
if you compare their
Yeah,
school
my
career.
point is like he wasn't a top tier team or anything, just a breaking kind of guy here. Then he went to Cambridge for his undergraduate, where he became, I think, probably at the time the second greatest Pakistani speaker of all time after Ansar. No?
No, I think you miss out the first 2 years of Asad's Cambridge career, where he is similarly subjected to ridicule,
Okay.
and Asad only sort of breaks. I think I don't remember again. It was like partials at Worlds or partials at Octos or at Euros or something to that effect. Asad actually started becoming really good in his third year at Cambridge, where he got some respect, and then he became like super good when he was at
Yeah.
BPP with
I think
the JB Jackson team that made the final at Euros.
Yeah, they made the
Uh,
final at Euros and Asad ranked 12th best, which I recall was a very big deal because Europe was
Very
a
big,
much
yeah.
stronger circuit than Asia. And at that point, our crowning achievement through Hafiz was 12th best at Asia. So Asad
Yeah,
matched that in a much more competitive circuit. And yes,
exactly.
skipping, long story short, since we're not going into Asad's bio here, Asad came back a couple of times during the summers of like our early LUMS years, and we engaged with him a lot and learned debating. What is that like?
Mostly it was Asad coming to my house and using my money to eat paratha rolls. But I think the debate bit which Asad taught us, which was beyond what Hafiz was teaching us, I think uh, this is where the break from Hafiz also happens, not just on the beef that we had or whatever. It was more Hafiz would sometimes make arguments that sounded good and exotic almost. I remember there was some debate about like racism, and he was talking about how black bodies are exoticized and whatnot. And Asad was giving me the biggest side I've ever seen while Hafiz was saying this stuff and saying, "Please do not run this." It was, I think, that level above was only accessible because we had somebody who had gone to a circuit where the level of competition was completely different. And even if he wasn't the most successful person out there, he was still a lot more qualified than them. Asad was living with me at the time, or living close to me at the time, so he used to spend a lot of time with us. He used to give us feedback. I think I remember we altered not just the way that we spoke and the arguments that we made and the way that we made them, but particularly the biggest thing that he changed with our team, which we also felt was doing really well, was part of why we did really well, was the prep thing. just the bit around why the hell are you guys taking 5 minutes of silent time, and then why are you then writing your own stuff, and then why are you doing this? There's that level of like almost it was like a machine. The way that he thought of prep was like a machine. I think that the way that he taught us to do prep was the thing that probably mattered the most when we were speaking, because we it wasn't like we unlocked ourselves as speakers and we were like, oh yeah, we probably did still overachieve. We weren't that good. We were definitely not top 8 teams in Asia. um, but what we were doing at the very least process wise was a lot different. So I think the reason why the first year also led to like transformation to the second year was not just also us, but like people like what was it, Mifzal came, and then
Mifzal,
somebody also
Avish.
judged. Yes. So these kinds of people coming over, I think, also had a big effect, which is one of the things that I'm concerned about with regards to the Pakistani circuit, which is. From what I hear, they've caught up with the international world largely because of online debating as well, which means they have more access. But I think in person, having those people around is a lot more different to the access that you would get over a screen and stuff. So inviting over international C has also mattered. And yeah, essentially that was why I became as arrogant as I did. And yeah, we did genuinely feel that we were a lot better after or once we had gotten it. Bhai ki rep aa gayi thi.